don't want to like pull a cover and not show anyone with their hands raised if it's a charismatic church, and people come in and they've seen people like just sitting straight down. That's part of your brand.
Hello, everybody. My name is Alan Smith. I am with Design Revival, and this is the Design Revival Chat. And today I have Brian White with us.
Hey.
Brian White is a brand specialist. He does interface design and web design for Brian White Design Studio. He's located just outside of Kansas City in Lawrence, Kansas, near Kansas State University. Is that Kansas?
No. It's Kansas University. Kansas State, way out in Manhattan. So
yeah, I don't want to mess that up. I know it's
like blue. So yeah.
So Brian, thanks for being with us today. And we want to spend some time today talking about branding and specifically church branding, and look at why that's important, why churches should really consider branding, and hopefully unpack some things. And at the end of this, have some steps that people can take to kind of really evaluate their church branding. So Brian, let me ask you first. First question here is, what is branding and why is branding important?
Branding goes back to that cattle thing, where it was a brand and that you could quickly associate this cattle from another one. And usually it was really simple marks that people could read from far away. And that in itself in today's world is, standing out in social media, in any place that you can be seen.
What are some of the key aspects of, if we think about, is branding just a logo? Like, is it just a mark? Is it like, what are the things that kind of make up a brand, and how should we kind of look at a brand?
There's like many different parts of a brand. Usually the first part is the logo, and that's like your foundational footing. Mm-hmm. But there's just tons of layers. So you start getting into typography, like what fonts are used and why. It's like how you want to be perceived as a business. Obviously, it won't work all the time for every demographic, but
right.
And so it's like you start to get a sense of some of their personalities and like some of their likes and dislikes, but also how they want to come across as I'm saying as a church, but I'm talking as churches or small businesses in general. So
one thing, I've had some conversations with people, with churches and pastors about their church brand, and the thing what I try to communicate to them is that brand is more than just a single little icon or a logo that you may have that you put on stuff. That it really connects emotionally with people, which is, I think it's interesting, your way of assessing that in your questionnaire with sort of sliders of, do you feel this way or that way? Because ultimately what you're trying to get to is that emotional or psychological sort of connection that people want others to have with their organization. Is that right? Is that correct?
It's like a cheat sheet for me. So like sometimes I'll have all these questions that I can look at and I can print out and read through, but then at the end of the day, I'll make these little sliders and I'll have those when I build the marks or looking at typography, and I'll be like, does this say, welcoming? Is this approachable? Some of the key words that they'll say over and over, and it'll be like, oh, I'm writing this down, but you don't know it. So
yeah, it's, you're trying to evaluate or create some kind of system that communicates to people when they see it. And that system needs to really tie into all of those aspects of who you are. Are you to use some phrases you've used, are you kind of a warm environment? Are you kind of a cool environment? Are you, and all of those things really come into the brand, and really being able to figure out a way to communicate that visually with color and typography. Those are challenging parts of building a brand.
As you go into a brand, those layers, once you start doing those layers correctly, I'm going to go this way with my hands, that foundation is set and you build on that foundation. And certain pieces like fonts, those stacking layers get stronger and stronger as you move forward. And I've seen it where churches in 7 years who've had a good brand system can shift and kind of update and say, like, hey, check out our new look. But they're building off of their old brand.
Yeah.
They're not fleshing it and
Right, complete whole new thing. Why would you say it's important? Why is having a thought out brand and brand guides and really thinking about all of the whole branding package? We kind of get conceptually, we understand why that's important for business, right? I mean, if Nike or Apple or Google didn't really have a brand, it could really affect their bottom line. But for a church, why is branding important for a church to really think through and consider?
If you dive down deep, it's theology is what's most important. But to get people interested to go, you provide a style and a sense of it to get people interested to come. So regardless of brand, if your theology is not set right or it's not right for you, you're going to go somewhere else.
Right.
So, but the idea is that you don't want to pull a cover and not show anyone with their hands raised if it's a charismatic church and people come in and they've seen people just sitting straight down, that's part of your brand. It's like if you're showing that on your website and then people come in and they're dancing around and you're just uncomfortable, that's the idea is you're trying to put your best foot or face forward and showing who you are, your mission statements, all that stuff is part of your brand. That's your voice. So if I understand what you're saying, the reason branding is important for a church is because it's through your branding that people who aren't part of your church yet can really understand whether it's a place they want to go to or not. Correct. And those are called touch points, basically, where people will touch your brand in different areas of life. So many times with churches, it's word of mouth, which is the most powerful. I heard about that church. Yeah.
I have heard it said that if you really want to know what your brand is, ask someone to tell you what they know about you. Yeah. And whatever they tell you about your organization is really what your brand is. And so if word of mouth is that important, then having a clear brand that communicates who you are and what you're about, especially since word of mouth is valuable, probably really plays a very valuable part in whether or not people would be willing to even come to your church to try it out. I mean, if they're looking for a church, they're going to go by the things that they've heard or things they've seen, and that ultimately is your brand.
Right. And I mean, you can go to a church and you can look at their past sermon histories and what they're preaching about, and they could be really eclectic, jumping from, Psalms to New Testament and then back. And then there's other churches where I've been in where they only preach in New Testament and no Old Testament. And so it's you're like, well, okay. So, it's where are you at in that aspect? Are you eclectic, and in a bad way? I mean, where you're just hodgepodge and you don't have an interior designer helping you or someone who has a good eye to pick out colors that aren't bright red or something.
That's interesting. That's interesting because you've just added a concept that I hadn't really even considered when I think branding, because what you've just suggested is that even your on-campus interior decoration is connected to your overall branding.
Correct. Yeah. And I've got a good example. Let me show you this one. Okay. So this is my church, and this is the new logo that I did for the church. Let me tell you where we were before. We were in a Masonic temple that we were renting. Okay. So you already have a stigma of that. The name was Greenhouse Culture. And as in the last 6 years, greenhouse culture has shifted to be hemp, not hemp, but marijuana. Yeah. So it's okay, our brand is not hippie, not marijuana, corporate, but approachable. And so I actually broke down the model of the church in the logo. So as you can see, you have the G for greenhouse, But what's cool about our church is every other week we have neighborhood church. So we meet in homes in smaller groups. So there's like this inner circle with the neighborhood church but to get to neighborhood church, you have to go through you first come into the base church, but the idea is that you bridge over and go into the inner circle. So a lot of thought was into the mark.
Yeah.
We had an approachable younger audience, but we wanted it not corporate, but like definitely not hippie. So that was the idea behind it. But you can see the colors still are green.
That's very interesting. I really like the use of negative space that you built into the mark, the use of the cross that's kind of in a negative space. There's a lot happening in that mark, and yet it looks incredibly simple. Yet there's a lot of story that you tell in that mark.
Yeah, it's been going good. We launched that new logo, and then we actually bought Buffalo Wild Wings across the street, ripped it apart, and it's been incredible, the difference, versus like steps up into like a temple kind of scary old building versus like a glassed opening where you can see everything happening. It just makes a huge difference.
Learn how excellent design can direct people to the Savior. Come to Design Revival and raise the standard for your ministry. Visit designrevival.ga for more information and to register for the Design Revival Conference. September 6th and 7th, designrevival.ga.
Your church, you said, is kind of a small church. Like, what is small? Tell me what kind of numbers we're talking.
I think around 300.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that to me, that's an interesting piece of data to think about as a church, that even a fairly small church, a 300 attending member church, needs to seriously think about their branding and what message they're putting out with that branding. And just like the quote big mega churches do, it's not about the size of the church that determines whether or not you need to think about branding. I mean, if you are a church, regardless of your size, branding matters.
I mean, usually you can see those by, the font choices that they use. Or, I mean, it's people who usually don't have a design background or have anyone who is creative in that mindset, and they just pick up Word and see what fonts are there, type it out, and then like clip it, and
everything communicates. And so if we're not thoughtful in what we're putting together, it really does affect our brand and how people perceive us.
The idea is that you want there'll be mess ups, but as long as you cover it up with correct stuff, then it works. And every few years you need to revisit it and see if it's working, because it's like your demographics might change, or your whole system. Like if you got in a new pastor who has a little bit more flair or something, and you want to add something, the idea is that you want to build on it versus like just flush everything that's been worked on. And so like if you can shift and build it, it'll be a lot stronger. So
what if I'm a church and I've got a logo, I've got a mark, I've got some branding guidelines, but they're like 10 or 12 years old. I don't know how long they've been around for a while. How do I what should I do to rethink about rebranding? Do I throw it all away and start over?
It really depends. But if there's fun history and like traditions that are important to the why can't I think? The community, the church, the congregation, that's what I was trying to say, is if there's tradition or history in the congregation that is good, and there's certain aspects of it that have been used but just need updating, then I wouldn't throw it away. I would just update it.
You can look at things like maybe updating your fonts, updating color, changing out the space. That's an interesting way to do it too. Just kind of
one of the churches I rebranded probably about 5 years ago. When we rebranded, they repainted the church to the brand colors and it freshened everything up, and then it kind of locked everything together pretty well.
It's the total package. It's everything. It's not just a logo. And I think that people always misconstrue the idea that if I need a new brand, I need a new logo, and it's all about their mark. But reality, the branding is everything that people come in contact with when it comes to your organization or your church. Well, I hope you have picked up a couple tips or tricks when it comes to branding today, and you have thought a little bit more about how your church should be branded. It's not just a logo. It is everything that people come in contact with your church. And so I hope you have learned something today on Design Revival Chat. This has been Brian White. He's been with us, and I appreciate him coming with us. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Alan.
So you guys have a good one. Look out for our next episode. Thank you very much. Have a great evening, and we'll see you at Design Revival.